And we're back with another review, As You Like It. The Gerald Kraak Anthology is a collection of entries of short stories as well as poems and essays, photography, including a bit of journalistic work. I'm joined in studio now by Efemia Chela to review her submission, which was part of over 483 submissions. First of all, congratulations on making it into the Gerald Kraak Anthology. Let's talk about your submission and what inspired it. Perhaps maybe let's start with your influence in terms of writing it.
Well, my influence in terms of writing was a wonderful book I read called The Argonauts by Maggie Nelson, who's an academic and a feminist and a queer thinker and writer. And it's a small little book, maybe about 180 pages, and I just found it literally life-changing.
Right.
And I decided to use her book as a lens to view my own life and my own life as a black bisexual woman who is out, and just how I'm able to operate or not operate in society.
What is life like for a black bisexual woman on the African continent?
Well, the nice thing about this collection is that it's bringing up nuance, because there just isn't one perspective. I'm very lucky. I live in South Africa and I also live in a suburb. So for me to be openly bisexual is not going to get me killed. If I moved to a township, it might get me killed. I also am quite feminine, so most people don't realize I'm bisexual when they look at me, because they have a very static idea of what that looks like. And so I pass, and so I have certain privileges. So it's difficult negotiating it, and it's tricky, but it's who I am.
It is who you are. Perhaps let's go to, personally, the journey in terms of getting to a point where you're just like, this is who I am and I'm comfortable with who I am.
I think I always knew that I wasn't straight, but I come from a very conservative, religious family, and that sort of thing is not tolerated at all. And part of what the essay deals with is every time I return back home, I have to almost go back into the closet because it's just something that's viewed as not acceptable. And eventually I just got tired of pretending that I was someone I wasn't, and I went to university and I told my parents, and they were horrified, and they have a sort of amnesia about it, so they pretend to forget, and that works for them, and I suppose it kind of works for me as well.
Right.
But it's nothing I'll ever stop apologizing for. And it's also just, you know, an aspect of my life.
It's nothing you should apologize for. Do you find that perhaps that is a problem, navigating or having outside people also navigating your sexuality and coming to terms with it? Why should that be a burden that is placed on you?
That's the thing as well. I mean, once you know, you're stuck between two options. You either don't say anything about it, and then someone says, oh, well, you'll find a husband, and you're like, husband or other person who might be a woman or who might not identify with the gender binary. And then that brings up a whole conversation, and you know, you have complete strangers telling you you're going to hell, who were just talking quite nicely to you a moment before. And so it's an interesting decision, and it's the wonderful thing about this collection is that you get to see how people all across Africa deal with it. So you get to perspectives from Nigeria. There are people in this book who are using pseudonyms or who have been taken hostage because of their sexuality and have tried to be outed, who have had to, you know, actually go into exile just in order to have the human rights that are extended to everyone else.
Was that something of concern to you?
It wasn't, because I know I have a privileged place in society, but if I do look at my future, and if I am honest, I do think, am I actually going to be able to live in Africa and actually be able to find a partner in the long term? Am I? Because, I mean, being gay in New York is very different. Being gay in the UK is very different. I mean, I'm half Zambian and half Ghanaian, and it's illegal to be gay in both of my countries.
What is life like for someone whose sexuality is not what society expects it to be in those countries? You're saying it's illegal, but to what extent would people go to chastise someone who chooses to identify in a different sexual way?
Well, I mean, one of the authors, who is Nigerian, actually was trapped online. So he thought he was texting someone and messaging someone online who was also gay. And that's a common device that they use. And then they organized to meet up, and he was taken ransom. And they basically beat him up quite severely and said, we are going to out your family, and they will be shamed in the community for having a gay child if they don't pay X amount of money. And also, it forces you to operate in very dangerous spaces. A lot of people go to public spaces or strange places to have sex because there are no options. You can't just say to people, oh, well, you know, I'm gay and this is my partner. And there's also a very, there's not really any support.
Right.
There's a feeling of like, I'm the only one all the time. And so the great thing about a collection like this is it brings together a sort of nebulous community, so people can pick this book up and they can read and see, I'm actually not alone. And terrible things are happening to queer people all over the continent, but there is also a side of joy. And I think the photos in this collection particularly show the joyful side, that like being gay, being queer isn't all misery and suffering. There is a joy in it.
People always feel what they don't know, hey?
They always feel what they don't know.
So there's a beautiful excerpt from Pwangulongi Duad. I hope I'm saying that correctly. Africa's future has no space for stupid black men in terms of his submission. And he says, Afro-moderns know how badly their stupid forefathers performed in the past and are now refusing to mourn it. They know about colonialism and slavery and neo-colonialism and imperialism and other isms unfavorable to Africa, but are not going to keep wailing over the deeds and greed of devilish, vile, horrendous and criminal people like those idiotic post-colonial scholars did. When I read that, that really it really touched me and it resonated, where there's so many things that we need to rewrite and get right as a people. There comes a time when you cannot blame everybody else, where we have to look within in terms of finding solutions, and especially with issues of sex and sexuality on the continent.
Definitely. And his essay was the winning essay, and it's an incredibly forceful essay, but it's really saying that all these things are interconnected. All these things of, you know, prizing, you know, wealth, or prizing race, or prizing class, or prizing sexuality, heterosexuality, are all linked oppressions. And we as Africans have to start defining what is going to make our society a society where everyone has equal opportunities, equal rights, and equal access to happiness.
Respect. It starts with respecting the next person's choice.
And also understanding. I mean, you know, so many people don't understand what a trans person is. And they think it's appropriate to ask a trans person what's between their legs. Right. When it's not really any of your business.
Right, right. Do you find that there's a lot of perhaps fear in terms of identity, where someone doesn't even know what to refer to you as? Instead of referring to you as a human being, they're like, oh, are you sorry, what do we call you? What do we say?
There is a lot of fear, but I also think that if you encounter someone whose gender who's gender non-conforming, or whose gender that you are not certain of, if you politely ask them how they like to be addressed, they're usually very happy to just say, these are my pronouns. I am a they. But also you have to come with an attitude of openness as well. It's very difficult for someone to give you their pronouns and then say, well, you know, this is really awful. I know this is what you want, but I'm not going to use those pronouns. I'm decided that your parents decided that you were a girl, and so that's what you're going to be.
I grew up and I decided that I can be whatever I want to be. Before you anything else, you're human, and you have to see that.
And this is the thing, you know, we need to change the conversation in Africa, and this is what the other foundation, Jacana Literary Foundation, is doing, to not LGBT rights. These are human rights.
Right, 100%, full stop. Thank you so much for coming through this morning. That was Efemia Chela chatting to us about her short story in the anthology As You Like It. We take a short